This is Thomas Kissinger, and I invite you to come take a journey with me, a journey in search of truth. This is the story of how I came to understand the ultimate restoration of all things through Jesus Christ, that ultimately, because of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, yes, ultimately, all will be saved. Everything will be restored. Everything will be made friendly, brought back to God the Father. And God will be all in all. This is a section in one of my up-and-coming books entitled, What If? And in this section, I'm basically telling the story of how I came to know this, or how this was brought to my attention. A journey in search of truth. I can still remember sitting at his kitchen table. The year was 2000 and the location was Pierre Part, Louisiana. I was having a discussion with this interesting man about God. His name was Clark. He was extremely passionate, and he was of a different religious persuasion than I was. Clark challenged some of my core beliefs about heaven, hell, salvation, and the afterlife. He was quite knowledgeable, well-read, and a very witty man. Clark calmly flipped through the pages of the Bible, linking many different passages together to prove the things he was presenting. I listened intently, not really trying to debate or disprove him. His use of word meanings was quite impressive, showing me English words in the Bible that came from specific Hebrew or Greek words originally, and how over time they have been misconstrued or translated in a wrong way. I admit, when I left his house, I knew where I was going on the ride home, but I did not know where I was going spiritually. Clark startled me. His facts seemed undeniable. He caused me to question everything I believed and was taught about God. It was from this time on I purposed in myself to look at all my beliefs and study them out to a final conclusion of whether they were correct or not. My encounter with Clark was the initial spark that sent me on a journey in search of truth. 1 year later, I was forced to make a career move within my industry. The corporate company I was working for at the time closed their Baton Rouge location, forcing me to find work elsewhere in my field. After many phone calls and much networking, I landed a job in my same line of work right in the heart of Baton Rouge, with a well-known and prosperous company. It was here that I had the most amazing 7 years of my life, meeting a group of incredible people that introduced me to the most profound information on planet Earth, as far as I was concerned. While working with this company, I met a man, the greatest man I have ever met, named Louis Thompson. Would later meet his son, Billy Thompson. These two individuals launched me into a discovery of truth so radical I still get chills at the mere thought of what took place. I could write an entire book on the man Louis Thompson, the man with the boots, as I called him. Who he was, what he believed, and how he lived. But for now, we will stick to the topic at hand, my discovery of the unconditional love of God for all. Louis started in on me from day one as I worked side by side with him. We instantly connected and talked every day about God. And I remind you, I worked with him for 7 years. Actually, 7 years and 7 days to be exact. He told me he had something very heavy to tell me about God. It was something, according to him, that would take several pots of coffee to get through. He was known for his one-liners. He had hundreds of them. I kept urging him to tell me what he had to tell me and that I could handle it. It took about 2 months of asking him before I would find out what he was referring to. And it still did not initially come from him, but from his son, Billy. Billy Thompson was one of the most energetic and enthusiastic guys I had ever met. Louis and I would meet with Billy at one of the local Waffle House restaurants to drink coffee together and talk about God. This particular Waffle House would later come to be known as the Holy Ghost Waffle House, which we named it after many meetings. It was located in Hammond, Louisiana. It was at this Waffle House after one of our meetings that I was introduced to a new way of thinking about God. While Lewis was still inside, his son Billy and I walked out into the parking lot, and then and there he hit me with it. He plainly told me God was going to save everyone. Everyone who had ever lived, is living, or would ever live. I stood there in awe that he would dare to say such a thing while the questions rolled through my mind and then to my lips and out of my mouth. I asked him, how could this be? What about this? What about that? Right about this time, as I stood dizzy in the parking lot looking at Billy and asking him questions, Lewis walked outside. It did not take him long to realize what was going on. He knew Billy had just dropped the bomb. Billy and I talked for a little while longer in the parking lot. But just like Lewis said, this one was going to take several pots of coffee to get through. This was not something you could digest in 5 minutes, 5 weeks, 5 months, or for some, even 5 years. It was something that shook you to your core. I remember studying the information in the beginning and feeling like I was beginning to see where Billy and Lewis were coming from, but then having reservations about it all. I told Billy I need to take a break from the meetings and talks. I took a break for a few months, but this information was so astounding that it demanded an answer one way or another. I had to know the truth, and I got to the place where I did not care what it was. I just needed to know the truth. I felt drawn to start meeting with Billy again at the Holy Ghost Waffle House. I met him there a few times without Lewis. I remember when I got to the place where I told Billy, I don't know if you are right, but I sure hope you're right. That was the start of a breakthrough for me. The day I saw it for the first time was actually a meeting at Billy's house. I arrived at his house at 6 a.m. in the morning, and he lived an hour away from my house. We were serious. We were meeting to discuss matters of truth. We talked for hours. We talked until about lunchtime, only making it on lots of coffee and very little food. I was determined to see where he was coming from and how he could make such claims as all being eventually saved in the fullness of time. I grilled him with very specific questions, and I demanded real answers. And Billy gave me real answers. He broke things down to me, the nuts and bolts of what he was saying. I had a breakthrough that day. I could really see it. And Billy knew I could see it, and I knew that Billy knew that I could see it. This all took place over a weekend break. When I went back to work on Monday, I met Lewis at the coffee pot as usual. I told him I met with Billy over the weekend and what had happened. Lewis was so excited he could hardly contain himself. It was now time to search things out together, Lewis, Billy, and myself. We were headed together on a journey in search of truth. We ended up meeting with and talking to people all over the United States with an understanding of this information, even linking up with people in other countries. I'm still friends with Lewis and Billy to this day and talk with them quite often. We have such a deep bond due to the revelation truth we all came to know and discover together. I went on to write and self-publish 5 books on my discoveries. And here we are brought to this latest book, What If? I have written books in the past and gone into very specific explanation of the nuts and bolts of why I believe what I believe. But here in this latest work, I want to reach a larger audience, the masses, the world at large. Unbelievers, as well as believers in God, must be confronted with this magnificent information. This book is not meant to be exhaustive in nature, but rather to hit the high points and to point those who are hungry to deeper study and research. It is with great pleasure and delight that we at Straightway Publishing Company present this work to you, the reader. It is meant to cause you to rethink, question, soul search, test, and as the Apostle Paul said, prove all things, hold fast that which is good. Remember, relax and enjoy the journey. And there's a little bit of information, the story of how I came to understand the restoration of all things through Jesus Christ.